Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cash's Corner.
So, Kash, a couple of things I wanted to cover today. One of them is the Department of Justice responding to the National School Boards Association letter, basically saying it believes there's a threat from, potentially parents. And the Department of Justice actually responded to this letter from the National School Boards Association, saying it's going to convene with different levels of law enforcement and discuss the issue and presumably protect the teachers or the Teachers Association. What are your thoughts on all this? Seems like a kind of a strange set of developments.
I guess what the Attorney General is saying is that parents will take to physical violence at some of these meetings, but I don't understand the basis for that because I haven't seen any information to support it. If we're going to use a national police force locally, I want to know what the intelligence or information is from the FBI, who's supposed to report to the Attorney General. Does the FBI have information to support this allegation? Are they saying people have been threatened, or they have good credible reporting and say people will be threatened at parent-teacher meetings or school meetings in municipalities, which are a local matter, which are a state and county matter, not a national law enforcement matter? And if there is, then maybe there's a basis to do that. A lot of times we do joint work, that is, federal and state come together to do certain law enforcement engagements when appropriate. It happens a lot. But I'm wary of the Attorney General entering a political fray by saying, well, because I received a letter from the National School Board Association, I'm going to respond publicly. He could have taken another approach and directed the FBI to engage local law enforcement quietly and gone to them in person and said, do you have any merit? Do you have any information to support this accusation? And if you do you need funding? So a lot of questions, probably not a lot of answers at this time, but that's kind of where I'm at on that.
So, I was just interviewing someone who's been active around the Loudoun County Public School Board. And I was, and this is one of the groups ostensibly has been very active and agitated. And, I asked her, do you feel there's any threat of violence or anything like that? I haven't seen anything like that. Yes, we're very organized. Yes, we're very active. It feels to the people that have been active in these situations that I've been speaking to as if this is kind of a stretch to attract, sort of federal scrutiny.
Well, I think there's a lot of credence to that without having access to the underlying information. I haven't seen an uprising or a case where it merited federal, national attention. God forbid, even if there was an incident at a local school board meeting, it's a local school board meeting for local authorities and sheriffs.
As in, like, there's actually a fight.
Right. Even if that were to happen, hopefully it doesn't, but even if that were to happen, there would be a state matter, a county matter, a municipality matter for local law enforcement. It's not one that you send in federal agents to. That's just not what federal law enforcement is for. Unless they're telling the nation that the problem is so entrenched from East Coast to West Coast in every municipality, like the MS-13 example, right, that we have to have a federal task force set up. And I haven't seen any mass breakouts of violence at school board meetings. But to say that domestic terrorism is on the rise, I think is not helpful, because that crime itself doesn't technically exist in the federal statute. I think what the viewers need to understand from my time as a national security prosecutor and a terrorism prosecutor is that domestic terrorism isn't a separate criminal offense. International terrorism is a separate criminal offense. Domestic terrorism, to get into the specifics, is a sentencing enhancement. So basically you say X individuals committed a crime, and under the sentencing guidelines after they're convicted, the U.S. government comes in and says, we want to sentence them to even more time than normal because their activity was so unusually harmful based on the domestic terrorism sentencing guideline. But the activities that people associate with domestic terrorism are also blurred now, because I think there's been too much politicization of what is and is not DT, domestic terrorism. And I think, if we're talking about this school board stuff and anywhere near domestic terrorism, I think we're way off point. I think if you recall, out in the Pacific Northwest a couple years ago in Oregon, there was a number of Americans who basically commandeered big pieces of land and said, the U.S. government is not welcome here. Those cases went through the courts, and they were viewed under the light of domestic terrorism. Now, I think there's more of an application in that scenario than anything that we're talking about with this letter.
So people who are advocates of critical race theory and related disciplines often have this maxim, speech is violence. And I'm wondering if this isn't something that's kind of playing in here.
Maybe. I mean, I think you could probably take a look at it from both sides to say, if parents are just going to school board meetings to voice their opinions, that's totally legit, especially at public schools, when they want to know what their children are being taught. Totally rightfully so, right? And if on the other side, the U.S. government has information that says, no, this kind of behavior leads to direct violence, and so much so across the country that we need to interfere or intervene, then maybe they're on the right. But I am likely to believe the former versus the latter.
So let's jump to our second topic then today. Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, who broke rank, posted a series of videos even after he was given a gag order by his bosses in the military, and then was thrown in the brig. What do you think of this situation?
I got a lot of thoughts, so I don't know where exactly to start. Probably my main one is from my time in DOD and the chain of command and following the chain of command. And for a soldier, whether he's in the right or wrong, to break the chain of command, you simply just can't do that if you want the Department of Defense to work. Because if one soldier does it and then everybody else thinks it's okay, and then you have 10 and 20 and 100, you've got a really big problem. The whole purpose of the military is whether or not you believe in the orders you are given, you follow the orders you are given. And there's a process in place if you believe those orders are unlawful or unethical or violate some agreement, then you go to your superior officer and you keep going up the chain. Now I know people are like, oh my God, that takes forever. Well, it might, but as a former federal prosecutor and a federal public defender, that stuff takes time. You got to do it the right way. And to break rank, I think, unfortunately, even whether I personally agree with him, there was a different way for this to be handled, especially since after the first incident, he was instructed, even by counsel, we have to let this matter play out in the military, under the UCMJ, in the military court-martial system, and then speak out.
Well, so let's briefly look at, kind of what he did then.
Yeah.
So he, essentially, he went on camera, basically said, I feel like the military brass needs to take accountability for, what's happening around me here in Afghanistan.
Yeah. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, United States Marine Corps. People are upset because their senior leaders let them down, and none of them are raising their hands and accepting accountability or saying, we messed this up. I have been fighting for 17 years. I am willing to throw it all away to say to my senior leaders, I demand accountability.
That's one thing I'm probably in violent agreement with him on. The military leadership has failed us. And we've talked about it before on earlier episodes about Afghanistan and the chairman and the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. I agree. They failed the American public when it comes to Afghanistan. If you leave one American behind, you failed. They left thousands. So what he's saying is they, the leaders of the military, should be held accountable. I could not agree more. And you and I have been talking about that accountability and how we get it for some months, if not close to a year now. I was an individual who was in one of those leadership positions in the military. I was the highest ranking civilian in the US DOD as its chief of staff. I get it. But I also get that you can't just have soldiers break rank when you want the same thing. It doesn't work in the Department of Defense. If we had soldiers in Iraq or Syria just say, I don't think we should be here, I'm leaving, the US military system would literally not work. And so for 98, 99% of those that serve, they abide by those rules. They volunteer to serve. No one makes them go. And they volunteer to serve, and I think they know that what's asked of them is unique in a lot of instances, but they also know they can't be political. It's the one thing that happens when you join the services. Anyone. Air Force, Marines, Army, Navy, Space Force. You cannot become political in any way. You can do whatever you want in your private time, but when you wear the uniform, you can't go in front of a camera and say, I think my leadership should be held accountable. It's just not the right way to do it.